Once upon a time, in a world not so different from our own, a great crisis struck the land. It was a crisis unlike any other, one that exposed the vulnerabilities that had been lurking beneath the surface for far too long. As the people grappled with the chaos and uncertainty that ensued, they began to realize just how fragile their society truly was. And now they all will vote for a new president to start a new life. The crisis began with a sudden outbreak of a deadly virus, spreading rapidly throughout the population and overwhelming the healthcare system. Hospitals were inundated with patients, medical supplies were scarce, and healthcare workers were pushed to their limits. The vulnerabilities of the healthcare system were laid bare for all to see, as the most vulnerable members of society struggled to access the care they so desperately needed. But the crisis did not stop there. As the economy ground to a halt and businesses shuttered their doors, the vulnerabilities of the financial system became painfully apparent. Workers were laid off in droves, unable to make ends meet or provide for their families. The disparities between the haves and the have-nots grew ever wider, as those with wealth and privilege weathered the storm while the most vulnerable among us suffered the most. As the crisis deepened, the vulnerabilities of our social fabric became increasingly clear. Communities were torn apart by fear and mistrust as people turned against one another in their desperation. The most vulnerable members of society, the elderly, the sick, the marginalized, were left to fend for themselves as those in power scrambled to protect their own interests. But amidst the chaos and despair, a glimmer of hope began to emerge. People from all walks of life came together to support one another, to lend a helping hand to those in need. The vulnerabilities that had been exposed by the crisis were also the very things that brought us together, that reminded us of our shared humanity and our interconnectedness. And so, as the crisis began to abate and the world slowly began to rebuild, we were left with a newfound sense of resilience and solidarity. We had weathered the storm together and emerged stronger for it. The vulnerabilities that had once threatened to tear us apart had instead brought us closer together, reminding us of the power of compassion, empathy, and community. And so, as we looked towards the future, we did so with a renewed sense of purpose and determination. We knew that the vulnerabilities that had been exposed by this unprecedented crisis could not be ignored or swept under the rug. We had seen the cracks in our society, and we were committed to repairing them, to building a more just and equitable world for all. And so, with hearts full of hope and minds sharpened by the lessons of the past, we set out to create a better future for ourselves and for generations to come. And though the road ahead would be long and challenging, we knew that we would face it together, united in our shared humanity and our unwavering resolve to build a world that was stronger, more resilient, and more compassionate than ever before.